This is the eHealth Radio Network, your source for health advice on demand. And now your host, Eric Michaels.
Thanks for joining us once again here on the eHealth Radio Network. This is your host, Eric Michaels. Today we're speaking with Jennifer Fraser, a best-selling author and award-winning educator who has a PhD in Comparative Literature. Her online courses and workshops provide dynamic lessons in the impact neuroscience has on personal development and culture change. Her new book is The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, which delves into how bullying affects the brain and how the brain can heal. And Jennifer, thanks for joining us here today on eHealth Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, certainly appreciate your time. Looking forward to hearing about bullying and how it affects the brain. We can't get enough information on that as well. So tell us, why did you become interested at all in what bullying does to the brain? Let's start and kick things off with that.
I was pulled into a abuse situation as a teacher, and I was working in a private school, and the bullying was being done by my colleagues. It was teachers who were bullying students. And what was fascinating to me was to watch how the system handled the crisis. And so we're told all these things about how we have zero tolerance for bullying and bullying is destructive and we don't allow children to do it and we stop them. And we're even increasing legislation to stop children from harming one another. But when it becomes adults who are doing it, the whole system goes into reverse. And we start to say things like, oh, they weren't bullying, they were motivating. Oh, they weren't bullying, they were using discipline. And so my training is academic. And so rather than just going along with the flow and believing that this is accurate or healthy, I started to do research into, well, if it's normal, if it's okay, if it's motivating, like what is the impact on the body and what is the impact on the brain? And what I found out was absolutely shocking. We have 30 years of research, at least, that shows that this type of treatment, like humiliating, shaming, homophobic slurs, put downs, yelling in the face, detaining when the teenager's trying to get away, these types of behaviors are incredibly damaging to the brain, and it can be seen on brain scans.
Well, that certainly is some eye-opening information to kick things off here today. I'm sure you could add a whole lot more to that as well. Tell us, what did you discover about how all forms of bullying and abuse harm brains?
What I learned was that the brain is really malleable. It's plastic. It can change. And so if you're raised in an environment, and many of us have been, we've been raised to normalize very bullying behaviors. So we have this kind of cognitive dissonance, or this really confusing way of behaving for our brains. Our brains are they like to be clear. They like to be able to answer the question. They work really hard to problem solve. And yet we live in a world where we say to child populations and teen populations, don't mistreat one another. Don't use your words to hurt other people. Don't hit other people or violate their physical space or their sexual being in any way. This is totally unacceptable. And yet when it comes to the adult world, our most prestigious, most powerful individuals in the world publicly display bullying behaviors every single day, and there's no accountability. So there's this really confusing dynamic that's impacting our health, our body health and our brain health in very serious ways. And a statistic, just to give you a sense of how serious it has become, since 2000, so from 2000 to 2018, suicide in youth populations, that's 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds, suicide in youth populations has increased 57%. We have incredibly mentally ill children, and yet we continue lurching forward in this. I hate to use the word, but it's true. We're ignorant. We don't know anything about our brains, really. We're not taught about them in school. We don't read about them, learn about them in general. Some of us do. And so when I wrote The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, I really wanted to step into the arena to say, I have a PhD in comparative literature, and if I can read these neuroscientific studies and their conclusions and what they learned about the brain and what they can see on brain scans, then everybody can. And we need to get educated.
Yeah, being educated on this is certainly where it starts. Good information as well. Now, is the damage done to brains permanent? I'm sure that's a huge question for the audience as well as myself.
Well, that is the greatest question. And I'm so honestly filled with happiness to tell you that our brains are incredibly adept at healing. Just like we can mend a broken bone, if our brains have, you can't really use the word breaks, but, if they have been damaged, if they've been harmed, if myelin has been eroded on our neural networks, or if our corpus callosum is hurt, or our amygdala is sort of inflamed and enlarged because we're so hypervigilant because we've grown up in an abusive environment, if our hippocampus, the memory learning center of the brain, if it has been shriveled up from lots of abuse, it can heal. The brain is amazing at healing, but it's really important to know the science again. And this is why in the book, with every single chapter, and it's a tough read. I mean, reading about what bullying and abuse from adults to children do to brains, it's not a lot of fun. At the same time as it's so important to know and get motivated, and then with every single chapter, learn evidence-based practices for getting your brain healthy again.
Really do appreciate your visit with us here today to talk about bullying and how it affects the brain. Of course, we're speaking with Jennifer Fraser, the author of her new book, The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, that delves into how bullying affects the brain and how the brain can heal here on eHealth Radio's bullying information and personal development channels, a part of the eHealth Radio Network. Now, Jennifer, is it possible to restore normal organic brain health after an abuse?
Absolutely. The brain has been discovered, especially in the work of the real leader in the field is Dr. Michael Merzenich. And he's an absolutely, not only is he a genius in terms of science, but he's also someone dedicated to changing the outcomes for children. And his research is so valuable, and the work that he's done with other neuroscientists to create a brain training program. It's called Brain HQ, and it's incredibly well designed by scientists to help you work daily on the kinds of exercises that will restore your brain to organic health. And it's like physical exercise. People need to understand that the brain is very much operates like a muscle in a sense, where you can strengthen it by working it out, by putting in time, by doing the exercises, by going to the brain gym. It's one of the components of a sort of multifaceted approach to bringing the brain back to organic health. And I'm lucky enough that Michael Merzenich took a sort of passionate interest in my book, The Bullied Brain, and he went through every single word of the book and then commented and made sure the science was perfectly accurate and dialogued with me and shared historical neuroscientific knowledge that he personally had learned in his lab with his colleagues. And he's really, he's just such a generous person. He wrote the foreword for the book, and he said that scientifically, the bullied brain is the most thorough treatment of the subject on planet Earth. So I was pretty pleased. And I think it's very inspiring and empowering for people to know that they can strengthen their brain, they can get it back to organic brain health, and so can other people in their lives who might have been hurt.
Well, that certainly is a great report right there, that it can be healed over time. Now, how can individuals whose brains have been bullied or abused get better?
Well, in the book, what I really try to do is motivate people by getting them to understand what's happened to their brain in the first place. What's so serious about injury to the brain is that you can't see it. And we tend to ignore things and not get engaged with things that we cannot see. So we ignore our own brains, and it's very detrimental to them. So what I try to do in the book is really illuminate the world of the brain. I try to bring it into focus for all people to see. And then I talk very specifically about what the neuroscientists know about the specific kinds of harm that the brain suffers. And if you don't have that ignition, if you don't have that activation energy, you're pretty unlikely to get out there and do the hard work. It's not a quick fix. Just like getting in shape is not a quick fix. It's hard. You have to be very disciplined. You have to put in daily practice. And you have to be motivated by knowing that you have, invisible to the naked eye, neurological scars on your brain. And it's really important to understand the damage. And then once you understand the damage, and this is why I take the time in the book to unpack it, once you know about the damage, then you're motivated to get out there and absolutely bring your brain back to health and the brains of other people. So, in our society right now, we privilege the body. We talk endlessly about the body. We look at the body. We talk about how the body is sculpted or not. Well, what we should be doing is talking about the brain and how the brain is sculpted by what we practice and by what we experience. So if you're in a toxic environment, one that's full of bullying behaviors, and not ones necessarily that are damaging the body, but they're verbal, they're psychological, they're neglectful in an emotional world. Those kinds of behaviors are incredibly damaging to the brain, and they can be seen on brain scans. So we've got to stop ignoring the impact of that type of non-physical behavior and the harm it does.
Once again, Jennifer, really appreciate your visit and bringing focus to this. Of course, you are the author of The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. Lastly, as we conclude, what advice would you give someone who has a bullied brain?
Anybody who has a bullied brain needs to get informed. They need to know what's happened so that they can heal their scars and they can restore their health. They have to remember at all times that having just a healthy body is not the full equation for a meaningful, healthy, positive, high production, high performance life. You need to have a healthy brain. So it's critically important to learn how to get your brain to be as healthy as possible.
And on that note, a great place to conclude. Jennifer, really appreciate all the insight and information and the report here today. Can't thank you enough for what you do in this space. If listeners wanted to pick up the book, The Bullied Brain, or to get more information on yourself, where's the best place online to get further information?
My website is also Bullied Brain, so it's bulliedbrain.com, and that's where you can, you can buy the book all over the place, but if you want to just do a quick route to how you can get it, you can go to the website, and I do a lot of writing of blogs and interviews and any of those things that might be helpful to people. You can find it at bulliedbrain.com.
And as always, we'll leave that link within the show notes of this broadcast for your convenience. Again, Jennifer, all the best, and thanks so much for joining us here today on eHealth Radio.
Thank you, Eric. It was so nice to talk to you.
It certainly was, and let's do it again. We've been speaking with Jennifer Fraser, the author of her new book, The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, that delves into how bullying affects the brain and how the brain can heal. And for all the details, visit bulliedbrain.com. And again, this has been your host, Eric Michaels, and we do thank you for your continued support of the eHealth Radio Network. Join us again soon for another episode that will help further expand your knowledge on those things that are important to your health and wellness. For more eHealth Radio reports, we invite you to visit our main radio channel site at eHealthRadioNetwork.com. And as always, we do thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the eHealth Radio Network. For more information or to subscribe to this podcast, visit eHealthRadioNetwork.com.